Let's just say that you're going for a new role and you're negotiating with the recruiter. You're thinking 92K and they throw out 80. All of a sudden, you're countering closer to their number. What just happened? We're going to talk about this effect. Stay right where you are. Welcome to How to Get What You Want. This podcast is for driven women ready to claim their goals and navigate their careers with clarity and confidence. Join me as we explore real stories, tools, and strategies to help you steer your career exactly where you want to go. Let's get started on helping you get what you want. Welcome. I'm so glad that you made the choice to be here today with me. I need somebody to listen to so that I don't feel like I'm just doing this all by myself. So thank you. I'm glad you're here. We talked last time about our brain and how our brain can give us doubt. And today we're going to continue the conversation around some other things that we do to ourselves that you may not be aware of. And they're noted, there's research around them to support why this happens to us or that this happens to us. So paying attention to these common threads, these themes is really important to be aware of because it's easy to get pulled into this trap and not realize it's happening to us. And the first one is, and I'm going to give you the research around it too, it's anchoring. So anchoring is an important aspect of negotiation. I talk about anchoring in my workshops, and it's important to look at anchoring and understand it and have a plan for it. And at the negotiation table, it's important, but it's also anchoring ideas outside of a negotiation. That's really powerful. But for today, I'm going to stay on the anchoring in the moment. And there's research around this called anchoring bias. And it's the first person that throws out the number, that's where the negotiation stays. And it's almost like we, in real time, probably faster than real time, our brain will readjust to that number. And all of a sudden, we're at a very different point than we had anticipated or wanted to be. That's why it's so important to have a plan for it. It's a really sneaky little brain trick that happens. And it happens all the time with pricing, casual conversation. Whenever this comes into play, it's like this mental magnet that pulls us in. And when you realize it's happening, it helps you see it more often. And what's really wild is there was a joint study done by MIT and Harvard researchers that asked people to write down the last two digits of their phone number. And then they asked them to bid on items in an auction. And what they found was that people with higher phone numbers, so the last number that they wrote down, bid up to 35% more for the exact same products simply because the number that was in their head before they started was higher than other people. Think about that. All they did was write down the number for their phone number, and it created this bias in their own head. That is how strong it is. It's so important to think about that. So be aware of that first anchor. And when somebody else beats you to it, be aware of what happens in your mind because it can affect what you say next. The second one is the research is around status quo bias. It's being comfortable with what's familiar. And that's not always the best decision. We all know that feeling of sticking with the devil you know. People say that all the time, and it feels safer. Like we already know this, everybody's familiar with it. Often this happens in companies. In fact, McKinsey looked at companies that were debating on digital upgrades, and they said that the ones that said, let's just wait one more quarter, ended up spending 27% more patching old systems than people that switched earlier. I'm not saying this always is the case, but it was interesting that they looked at this specific scenario across many companies and they saw that there was consistency in the results of it. The ones that waited had to pay more in the long run. It's really easy for us to say that starting from scratch is going to be a lot harder. it's like it becomes this team dynamic around it as well, that once you hear that safety, you just jump on board as well. So it's this status quo bias that we have individually, and it compounds when there's a whole team around it. The last one is the effect that's heuristic. Now I looked that up. I think that's right. The effect heuristic. And that's where things get emotional. And we talked about this last time, but it's that your gut overpowers your rational thinking. So when our pressure is high, we want to just stay safe, just stay where we are, not move forward. So when we hear things like penalties, late fees, risk, we don't want to do anything. So UCLA, there was a study done there, and they looked at even the way that people put risk versus not. So when there was words used like penalties, late risks, or late fees and risks, people didn't do anything. They just stayed where they were. But when they had the same ideas that were framed positively, like shared value, early access, safeguards, they were able to allow those people to move forward faster. 40% of people moved forward because they looked at it as there was opportunity for growth instead of, if I don't do this, there's a lot of risk. So you need to be thinking about, what words are you using? How are you getting people behind you when it relates to these brain activities? Because even using a different wording can change the way people behave. It makes me think of a study that Stanford did where they had these two teams play the exact same game, but they named the game two different things. One was the Wall Street game, and the other was the community game. And what they found was the players of the Wall Street game, more than 60% of the players went for winning, where the other one, they looked at it as, we're gonna work together, we're gonna be collaborative. So even wording sends flags to our brain that we need to either be okay with it, or we need to be avoidant because there's risk ahead. So it's really interesting to think about the research around that and how it's not just us, it's a thing to people, to teams, about how we react to different scenarios and how our protective brain can get in our way a lot. I'm going to share a couple stories that are aligned with each of these known psychological barriers that are associated to this research. So on the anchoring one, when you think about anchoring and the power of it, I had a friend who was selling a startup, and they wanted 30 million for the startup. And they had that in their head, and they went to the potential buyer that was really excited about it. And the buyer showed them that they believed the company was worth 12 million. So they went from 30 million was what they wanted in their mind. They hadn't thrown it out there, but the potential buyer threw out 12 million. And so when we had the initial conversations, they were like, we'll feel really good if we get 15. We'll feel really good if we get 14 even. And it was so interesting because before they had walked in, they were just like, we're not going to take anything less than, they were only around 28 million. We're not going to take anything less. But after their meeting, when they came back and we did a recon on what happened, it was so interesting to see their mind shift. They were justifying the fact that it was only worth this much and we would be happy with 13 million. Think about the change of that, the mindset around it. It took some time to really shift their perspective and really help open their eyes to see what leverage they had to bring that number back up. But that bias is so strong, and it really brings both parties to this place. It was really hard for them to really open up the negotiation again and get it higher up. They had to really think about what are the things around that to bring it up. And it was so fascinating to me to watch that mindset. It was just because they had that shift, that anchoring. It was so powerful. So the status quo, that idea that you just want to stay with the same solution that you have. I remember we were talking to a vendor about replacing this really old system, this workflow that didn't work that well for us, but we were unsure of all the holes in the system, to be honest. We just didn't know what we didn't know. So we were really afraid to move. And we said no, and we kept delaying, and we looked back on that time. It ended up being almost a year. It was about 10 months that it took us to move from our old system to the new. And so our finance people, because they were always just so shrewd about finding, you know, the look back at, did we do this well or not? They identified that we wasted $180,000 in trying to stay with the system that we knew. Had we moved forward, we wouldn't have had all of the things that we need to do, extra staff. There was different software things that we had to bring people in, some consultants in, and we had moved to the new system. Just by default, to be really honest, when we went to the new system, everything worked well. We figured it out quickly, and it allowed us to really shift around how the system and the workflow was happening. So it was a great way to really jump into the deep end, and it didn't take even nearly as long as we thought. And it was very costly, but we were so worried about changing. There were so many people that just, just from the aspect of change, especially when you're looking at a team element of it, when you have anybody that is reluctant to change, that can compound other people's thinking around it. And then you get that team approach. And then the last one is really about that wording, the things that you use. And I think about a friend of mine. He called me out of the blue. He said, "I've just been demoted and I just need some perspective." And we got on the phone and we started talking about it. And he quickly, I was really proud of him, quickly was able to kind of zoom out and see that within this organization, a lot of times when there was different shifts in the business, some people were kind of brought down into a different organization, and it wasn't really him, but it was the organization that needed that shift, and there were some promises made to him. And so it was so interesting that that idea that he was demoted. So we started saying, "Oh, this is a shift in where your career is going. This is a sidestep. This isn't a demotion." And he was able to recast that for himself in a way that he understood. Now he's going to a different part of the business. Yes, his team was changing. This was an opportunity for him to show up as a leader, to show up for that new leader he was going to be working for, to show the boss's boss's boss that he was an agent of change, that he was going to work out well with this idea. But that whole label that he put on it shifted his mindset in a way that really shrunk his mindset. He goes from abundance mindset to scarcity mindset, and then he was able to zoom back out again. And that abundance mindset can allow you to see the opportunities in it. Whereas when you label something, when somebody labels something in this one very static way, it inhibits our ability to look at it from a different angle. So you can see when people do that, that might get you to narrow your thinking. All of these do that. The anchoring, the status quo, the looking at the label that's put around it as a negative, those shift our mind to the scarcity mindset where we're like fight or flight. And it really does inhibit us, but it also puts us in a tunnel. And then we start from that place. And that's not a great place to start from. So what do you do about it? How do you move through and understand when this is happening? So when you think about that anchoring bias, be really clear about what you want. Write it down. Get really clear about it. Understand, what does 30 million mean? Is that a market rate? Can you get your head around it? Can you put the value around it? Get really clear about that so that when you go into that meeting and somebody anchors a lot lower, you can quickly shift. That's the strategy around it. So when you're really clear about the number you want, when you hear something else, you know that you're not going to shift that mindset around it. So say it first is really the strategy I'm doing air quotes right now, they use in negotiation because of that mindset shift, because it's so strong. So when you know your value, be the one that throws it out there first because the other party will stay there. You want to use that against them instead of them using it against you. So for the status quo question, ask yourself, what options do we have? And are we open to them? Make sure that you see it from fresh eyes. And if you had no other solution that you are facing right now, what would you pick? What you had today or what the future holds? Try to get that shift. And this is so important, especially when you're a leader of teams and being able to look at, oh my gosh, everybody is aligning on this decision to go this way. Can I be the stir of the pot a little bit and say, wait, hold on, before we go completely this way, let's assume that we're going to go the other way and let's identify all the risks and opportunities around that. So it's really making that shift to identify when you have to look at it from a different angle, whether it's you, whether it's you as a leader. If you're in the room and you're a part of a project team and you see it happening, how can you get everyone to shift their mindset to ensure that you're just not getting comfortable with status quo? And then that emotional label, shifting the words that are used. When you hear something that's really negative and it makes you like retreat and you all of a sudden are making a different decision because of it, how can you reframe it for yourself? How can you take that word demotion and go, all right, maybe I need to look at it from fresh eyes and look at it differently. What does this scenario really mean? Maybe that label isn't something that's helpful to you to see it that way because it limits your thinking. Maybe that label is limiting the team. Think about the Wall Street versus the collaboration. Just having that, the way you label things can inhibit people from having a broader view and looking at things from a creative lens. There's so much power in that. So important to be thinking about these subtleties in our brain, these natural phenomenons that we may encounter that we may not even notice, we may not see, we just fall into. So I hope that this has given you some evidence that this could be something that is hitting you, that might be around you. So my challenge for you when you think about adopting a negotiator mindset is start thinking about these things from just labeling them. Start to, in every conversation, go, oh, that's interesting. They just anchored that idea. They just anchored that number. Or, oh, are we just doing this because it's easy? This is status quo. Or look at the language that people are using when there's decisions being made. Are people more open or apprehensive? And maybe it's the labeling around that. So my mission to you is to be an observer of what's around you. Start to notice these things that are happening because I guarantee you'll be able to see all of these in the next week. And you even might find as leaders that some of these biases become natural and they become habits and they're just things that we do, we fall into. So be a leader that finds permission to upset the apple cart. Be able to say, look, we need to look at this from a different view. I'm adopting a negotiator mindset. I'm raising my hand. People who raise their hand, it's not just for more money, it's not just for more opportunities. It's saying, we need to look at this differently. How can we zoom out and look at this from a different view? I think we're limiting our creativity here. Such an important thing to think about. I love thinking about the research that supports these mental phenomenons that we all face all the time. And I see them with my clients every day. So where are you seeing it? Where can you observe this? If you like what you're hearing here, jump over to negotiationlove.com, sign up for my newsletter. Let me be in your inbox every week and share some more about how you adopt this mindset so you can raise your hand. Because negotiation is more than a skill. It truly is a mindset. I'm Susie, and I can't wait to see you again soon.